It's astonishing how a few quiet words exchanged in a living room can unravel a life that took 15 years to build. I remember the day my wife and I got married as vividly as if it were yesterday, the warmth of the summer sun on our skin, her laughter drifting softly in the air, and the sense that we had all the time in the world. For over a decade, we moved together in a steady rhythm. We found a house in a peaceful suburb, raised 2 wonderful children, our daughter, now 14, and our son, 12, and navigated the everyday challenges of adulthood. There was comfort in the familiar routines and the knowledge that we were tackling life together, side by side. But about 1.5 years ago, my wife came to me with a request that shook the very foundation of what I believed marriage to be. She said she wanted to open our marriage, that she was bored with it being just the 2 of us. At first, I couldn't comprehend it. To me, marriage was sacred, a bond meant to exist between 2 people, not something that could be expanded to include others. Still, the world is complicated, and love even more so. She reminded me that, before we got married, I'd had 5 sexual partners, while she had never been with anyone else. She said she needed more experience, more novelty, more excitement. Then she added that if I refused, she would consider divorce. I felt cornered. We had built a life together, had children who depended on us, and I still loved her deeply. Reluctantly, I agreed to try, but only under strict conditions: no bringing partners into our home, no talking about these partners, no letting our children or family know, all partners must be tested, and no choosing people either of us already knew. I tried to set rules that I thought would keep things emotionally safe. I suspected she already had someone in mind, and my suspicion was confirmed when, less than a day after we agreed, she went out and didn't return until the early hours of the morning. I tried to brace myself, reminding myself that I had agreed to this. I wanted to save our marriage, after all. For months, I felt miserable, like I was losing her, like I had handed her a license to drift away. Then, something I never expected happened: I met someone too. Her name was Amber. Our daughters were both in the marching band, and we started talking, small things at first, like the weather during practice or how the kids were progressing. Amber was divorced, and, like us, no longer tied to monogamy. She didn't want a husband or live-in partner, just occasional companionship. Over a few months, what began as a casual friendship turned into a physical relationship. To my surprise, it felt good, not because I wanted to leave my wife. No, I loved her desperately, but because, for the first time in months, I didn't feel like the only one losing out. I wasn't alone in my pain, I was fulfilling a need too, just as my wife had done from the very beginning of our open arrangement. Gradually, I adjusted to the idea of an open marriage. It wasn't my ideal, but at least our home life became less tense. We even rediscovered some passion between us, with absence and novelty sparking new energy when we were together. I started to believe that, maybe, this unusual arrangement could work indefinitely. But nothing remains static in a situation like this. Back in April, my wife's outside partner ended things. He was in an open marriage too, but his spouse hadn't known, and with the pandemic making it hard to meet, the relationship unraveled. Then, in May, fate tangled wires I'd worked hard to keep separate. We helped organize a Zoom concert for the band kids, and that's when my wife met Amber for the first time. Up until that point, the rule about not choosing someone we both knew hadn't been strictly broken. I hadn't known Amber before meeting her. But now my wife realized that Amber was the woman I had been seeing. She was furious. She confronted me, outraged that I was sleeping with someone connected to our daughter's activities. She insisted that, now that we both knew Amber, I had to end it. I refused. Technically, I hadn't broken any rules. I hadn't known Amber beforehand, and besides, my wife had been seeing her chosen partner all this time without any regard for my feelings. She argued that she now felt uncomfortable with our arrangement. I stood my ground, and the tension between us only grew. A few days later, my wife said she wanted to close the marriage again. Her partner was gone, and suddenly, she wanted monogamy back. I said I would agree, but only under two conditions: first, that the marriage would stay closed permanently, with no more opening and closing whenever it suited her, and second, that she would sign a document waiving spousal support in the event of a divorce. She exploded at the suggestion. She hasn't worked in years as a stay-at-home mom and feared I might leave her for Amber, leaving her with nothing. I tried to offer a compromise, suggesting we could include clauses that would void the agreement under certain circumstances, like if I were unfaithful, but she refused to even consider it. The conversation reached a stalemate. She demanded we close the marriage with no conditions, while I insisted on protecting myself because I no longer trusted her sudden changes in direction. She accused me of being dramatic. I felt trapped. Should I give in just to keep the peace? That night, a question gnawed at me: how did my wife even find out that Amber was my outside partner? Amber had insisted she hadn't told anyone. Then I found out that my wife had actually tracked me using her phone's location history. One evening, she followed me, introduced herself to Amber, and orchestrated the entire scenario to uncover and sabotage my relationship with her. When I confronted my wife about it, she first tried to deny it and then deflected, accusing me of invading her privacy. Finally, she admitted the truth. I was stunned. She had been the one who wanted an open marriage. I had reluctantly agreed. She'd had a partner from the very beginning, and I had endured the pain of that. Now, with her affair over, she wanted to force me to end mine through manipulation and deceit. This wasn't about fairness or rules anymore. It was about control. She couldn't bear for me to have what she no longer did. She said the marriage had to be closed again, and this time, there would be no conditions. I couldn't help but smell the hypocrisy, and the fear. She was terrified I had realized I could live without being solely dependent on her for emotional and physical comfort. We returned to therapy. The counselor tried to explore why my wife clung to these double standards. During a heated session, the truth came out: her old partner had been a high school boyfriend. He was someone she regretted not sleeping with back then. She had used the open marriage as a way to fulfill that desire, to live out that fantasy. Hearing this hit me like a punch to the gut. She had chosen a married ex-boyfriend to rekindle a long-lost passion, yet condemned me for choosing Amber, a divorced mother I met through our children's activities. I erupted in anger, storming out of the house and checking into a hotel for a few days. In the silence of that hotel room, the weight of everything bore down on me. But at least there, I could breathe without the constant conflict hanging over my head. When I returned home, I found my 14-year-old daughter cold and distant. After some pushing, she revealed that her mother had told her I'd been away with my girlfriend. Furious and betrayed, I showed my daughter proof that I had been staying at a hotel. I assured her that, despite the issues between her mother and me, I was not abandoning the family or running off with someone else. My daughter cried, and I comforted her, but inside, I seethed with rage. How could my wife involve our children in her manipulations? That anger boiled over into action. I decided to retaliate in a way that might finally make my wife see that I wouldn't be bullied. I found the Facebook profile of her ex-boyfriend's wife and sent her a message exposing the affair. It was a petty move, perhaps, but at that point, I was past caring about appearances. Didn't that family deserve to know the truth too? My wife was livid. She called me a monster for interfering in their marriage. I shot back, accusing her of lying to our daughter. She denied it, and we were back to square one, a dead end in this labyrinth of betrayal. We haven't spoken in days. Another therapy session looms, but what's the point? Every conversation devolves into a web of lies and half-truths. I used to believe that marriage counseling could mend any wound if we both worked hard enough, but now, all I see are landmines of distrust and resentment. I know the logical next step is to file for divorce. I know this marriage is irreparably broken. I know staying together only prolongs the pain. Yet, the thought of calling an attorney makes me feel sick. 15 years of my life have gone into this marriage. I've fathered 2 children in what I once believed was a loving home. How did it come to this? How did I end up fighting the mother of my children over the conditions to close an open marriage she insisted on having? The idea of no longer waking up to the chaos of kids getting ready for school, of losing shared holidays and family vacations, even after all the misery of recent months, that thought still hurts. It makes me feel like a failure, as if I couldn't handle the emotional turmoil or make the necessary compromises. But deep down, I also know the truth. I can't force her to be honest. I can't make her respect my boundaries. My therapist says I need to accept what's happened and focus on planning for the future. Maybe he's right. Maybe the love we once had is gone, replaced by 2 strangers locked in a toxic battle, trying to outmaneuver one another. Her accusations, her manipulations, and my retaliations have created a vicious cycle, and the only way forward is to break free. I have to give my children a stable home, even if that home is just me and them part of the time. I used to believe that love meant sacrificing everything, even my dignity, to preserve a relationship. But now I see that loving myself matters too. It isn't selfish to refuse to live in a world of lies and threats. It isn't selfish to say, enough, when someone who once swore fidelity and honesty repeatedly breaks those vows and rewrites the rules to suit themselves. The house is quiet now. The kids are asleep, and I sit alone in the dim glow of the living room, my heart heavy with the decision I know I must make. Tomorrow, I'll probably pick up the phone and call an attorney. I'll hate every moment of it, but I'll do it, for my sanity and for my children. Maybe one day, when I look back, I'll understand that I can't control what other people do. I can only control how I respond. Maybe then I'll find peace and rediscover who I am after all this chaos. For now, all I can do is survive. Step by careful step, I'll make my way out of the wreckage of what once was a marriage I cherished, and into whatever future lies ahead.